last week, if you weren't here, some of you were, I think. Yeah, some of you were here. We talked about looking at meditation from the perspective of three different areas, and I'm trying to refresh myself. And if you weren't here, you could. This is all on YouTube on the channel there. If you want to take a look at it. But we looked at meditation from the standpoint of looking at it, looking at thoughts as if they're moving past through our scenery. Like a cloud. A cloud's often used in relation and used as an example, for meditation, to look at it, to see our thoughts like clouds going through the sky. Bring this down. And so we talked about that a little bit. We also looked at the other aspect of being very, very present in our meditation. So these are like different things that we can look at, and it really can be important parts of our meditation. So to be present, is to notice the presence in our practice. So we can particularly notice that we eliminate the past and we eliminate the thoughts of the future. And when this happens, we stand more of a chance to be present in the moment. Very important stuff. And we talked about Eckhart Tolle and some of his teachings. He's teaching, basically, you hear him talk about the now a lot, because the now is this presence. It's the exact same thing. And Eckhart Tolle's book was The Power of Now, his first popular book. And then we also talked about doing such things as kind of practices that can be related to set-up practices sometimes, but like counting the breaths, or different things to bring us back to the breath, back to this presence. So when we're focusing on the breath, all we're asking ourselves to do is come back to this presence again and again. And so we even talked about the mala and using the mala and counting, the beads instead of counting numbers. We can count the beads, thought replacement, things like that. So, and if you don't know anything about any of these three things, just check it out on YouTube, because it's on there. So I want to talk a little bit more about three aspects of meditation that are directly related to mindfulness. And mindfulness is that power that we have. It does many different things for us, but it reminds us to have this practice in the first place. Mindfulness reminds us to come back to our meditation object, and it helps us stay there to our meditation object, which is usually the breath. And mindfulness is that also called, and sati is the Pali word for mindfulness, but it's also called bare attention, because it's attention that is stripped away of all of the judgments and decisions, commentary, that we normally put in our normal awareness. It's that moment before the cognition kicks in. When we see something, before we start labeling it, that pure awareness, that bare awareness when we see something or experience something without the mind kicking in to identify it or to judge it or anything like that. So we are using mindfulness all the time. But what we want to do is expand those moments of mindfulness, and that is the key. As the Buddha said, that's what can wake us up. The sati, and how we can use that, expanding those moments of pure mindfulness, pure awareness, we could call them. And there's three different areas, and this is a really old. I have so many copies of this book, Mindfulness in Plain English, and this is a very old copy I think it was printed in Malaysia. It's on the back, it says, strictly for free distribution, no commercial value. So, but it does have a lot of value. I mean, it's a wonderful book. And Bhante Gunaratana, of course, is the author. I just wanted to talk about, I mean, this entire book is about mindfulness in the first degree, I guess you could say. I mean, it's a totally wonderful book. People have been referring to it for years and years. It's been in print for almost 35 years now, I believe. And Bhante G was telling me how the book came about. It was an 8-week course that he put together for English people, and he was just thrilled to be able to teach all these English people in Washington, D.C., and so he named it Mindfulness in Plain English, you know, a guy from Sri Lanka, you know. So it's a guy, I mean, a highly celebrated monk from Sri Lanka. So he talks about mindfulness in such great detail, but so clear that I can't even pretend. I'm not going to read it, but I'm not even going to pretend. I'm just going to use some of his ideas here. Just some characteristics of mindfulness. 3 of them. There's more in this book, but I'm just going to touch on 3 because they're very. I was reading this earlier today, and they really hit me. Mindfulness is non-conceptual awareness. Mindfulness is present time awareness, and mindfulness is non-egoistic alertness. So first of all, mindfulness is non-conceptual awareness. Again, it is that awareness that we have before the mind kicks in, you know, before we start thinking about something. So it's very pure, and we have a chance to practice that in our meditation practice. It's a lot easier to practice that and be aware of that and get a feel for that, I guess we could say, and actually look at it as a state. But it is something that we can expand those moments, and we can use it in our everyday life. So our meditation is our training ground, you know, for this non-conceptual practice, to be able to see things exactly for what they are, with that overlay of the mind interfering with it. And there's nothing wrong with using the mind from time to time. I've even done it myself, you know, but, you know, so if we would say, what state am I experiencing right now? By the time I say inspiration, you know, there's something that I'm feeling right now. But by the time I came up with that word, you know, even though the state isn't there, but it's the cognition got in the way and kind of mungled it all up, you know. But so please keep that in mind when we do our meditation, that mindfulness is non-conceptual awareness. And this meditation that we do here is Vipassana, or insight meditation, which is mindfulness-based meditation. It's a mindfulness practice. So mindfulness is also present time awareness. And I kind of touched on this already. Present time awareness is Eckhart Tolle's now. You know, it is this present moment. And we can't be, we can, well, I shouldn't say we can't be, but we can be mindful in this present moment if we are thinking. The example in the book here is that if we're thinking of our 2nd grade teacher, that is memory. You know, we're just using memory. We're picturing our 7th grade teacher and how she beat us up or whatever it was, you know. But if we know that we're thinking about our 2nd grade teacher, then that is mindfulness. We're actually being mindful of the fact that we're thinking about it. And if we're thinking about something that we're going to fix in the future, a project or something that we're going to take care of, that is, you know, the thought process, the thinking process. Anyway, as long as we know that we are thinking of the future, as long as we know that we're fixing, as long as we know that we're, you know, doing this mental activity related to the future, then we can be mindful of thinking about the future. So we can be mindful while we're doing these things. But if we're what I call lost in thought, we're thinking about the future and we're not being mindful about it. And that's the thing that we do not want to do in meditation. We want to notice when we are mindful, when we are present, when we're on it, you know. And that's why it's listed here as mindfulness is present time awareness. Think of your 2nd grade teacher and think of you yourself thinking of your teacher. I can't even remember the name of mine. Who remembers the name of their second grade teacher? Very good. Like 2% of you. That's good.
That's my first and my third. I can't think of my second one.
Oh, okay.
That's really
So,
weird.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And one more characteristic of mindfulness is that mindfulness is non-egotistic alertness. And the example in the book, I think, is a good one. So it's like, suppose that there is pain in the body, that we have pain in the knee, for example. We say, I have pain in the knee. If we were mindful, we would notice that there's pain in the knee, but it wouldn't be my or I have pain in the knee. There would be the sensation of pain. The I-ness, yes, your I-ness, that would not get involved. That wouldn't be a part of it. And so it reduces that feeling of pain. We lose our attachment to it. We lose our identification with the pain. My pain, I have pain, all these different things. But not only with pain, but with everything. I had a good day. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, but the experience of the situation, the experience of the day, the hours, the time spent in the day, can be good without us identifying it as, that's my property. Those are my minutes, that were spent during the day. And it's true with everything. All our possessions and everything that we do, everything that we say, and we want to take responsibility for our actions. I'm not saying we don't want to do that, but we want to remember and maintain that the idea that with mindfulness, when we are protecting, having that job of protecting this stuff, we are almost automatically thrown out of mindfulness, and we're in that protection mode. So again, mindfulness is non-conceptual awareness. It's the awareness of something before the thought process comes in. Mindfulness is present time awareness. It's in the purest form, we aren't thinking about the past or the future, and we're in that presence, and we're trying to expand that. But we can be mindful of thinking about the past and the future, as I explained. And mindfulness is non-egotistic alertness. The ego, even what some people might call the soul or something like this, is not a part of mindfulness. So again, when we tie all these things together, we're very present. We're noticing everything just as it is. We're not letting this mind-body apparatus, I guess you could say, get in the way of any of it. So we will do a meditation here. I'll guide us through it a little bit in relation to what I just spoke of, and then we'll take it from there. So please make yourself comfortable. Allow the eyes to close. And as mentioned before, just simply take a moment and ask yourself, what state are you experiencing at this moment? And states from the Buddhist standpoint are generally looked at as what we might label as a feeling, how we feel. I feel happy, sad, jealous, angry, loving, compassionate, all these different words that we can use. It might be pleasant, might be negative. In Buddhism, the idea of what feelings are is just simply pleasant or unpleasant and neutral. And when we look at and label things such as desire, and aversion, restlessness, worry, doubt, these types of things, these are usually considered states. And when we look at these, that moment that we are looking for this state in the mind-body, we can assure ourselves that we are very mindful in that moment. Looking at what state we are experiencing. Mindfulness is that moment before the cognition slips in, before the thinking slips in. It's that moment of bare attention. And we see everything for what it is, without any labels. So nothing is good nor bad or beautiful or ugly. Because these are just labels. The seen is seen, the heard is heard, the touched is touched. What is smelled, and tasting is simply tasting. And even if there's a thought that arises in the mind, we can notice that thought before the cognition. We have to be very sensitive to that. We just notice thinking, that thinking is happening. That there's a particular thought and nothing to hang on to. We don't want anything to get sticky, nothing to attach to. So any thought that does arise, we just let it go. Just let it go in whatever direction it wants to go. Not trying to change it or mold it or hang on to it. And all of this happens in the present moment. It's difficult to be mindful when we're thinking about the past or thinking about the future. Until we recognize that the mind is dwelling on the past. Or we notice that the mind is reaching into the future, looking for something to change or fix. Or looking at something that is fearful, apprehension. We can do all of this while remaining mindful. Meditation is the training ground for all of this. And during all of this, we don't want the idea of the ego or the I or the me or the my to interfere with any of it. Because when there is any kind of attachment, that is when the I shows up, that we want something for ourselves, or we want to hold on to something, or we want something not to change, or even we want something to change. Or I or we desire for things to be different in some way. And without the I, the my, the me, it's very difficult for that to happen. If impossible. If not impossible. And all of this is done with the breath in mind. We're using the breath as our meditation object. And so adding the breath in these three characteristics of mindfulness isn't something that should complicate things, but actually simplify things. We rest our attention on the breath. We notice this presence that comes about, this idea that the mindfulness isn't very much in this present moment. We're resting on the breath, using the breath as a tool. The cognition slows down. And we notice that the continuous thinking and judging, the inter-dialogue, the commentary, slows down to a great degree and becomes more controllable and actually more watched with mindfulness. So the breath is the tool of choice in most situations. And so if we ever wonder what we are doing in our meditation, we are trying to be, and hopefully being, as mindful as we possibly can. Non-cognitive awareness, being very present, and being very selfless in the moment. Thank you, everyone. May each one of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. And may we all meet with spiritual and worldly success. May we have the patience, courage, and understanding to meet and overcome any problems or difficulties that we might face in life. Thank you again. The difference between, being mindful and actually waking up like full-blown enlightenment, that kind of thing, is the ability to remain mindful and to be mindful, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, and maybe even be mindful in some of our dreams and how we interpret our dreams and all of this, And a lot of people think that, well, that's a pretty incredible task, to try to be mindful, in every moment. But it is absolutely possible, I think we all know people that are more mindful than other people that we know that are like zero mindful, we could say.
Sleeping.
It's sleeping, right? As opposed to those who are awake. And those that, it is like some people are sleeping through life, not being in present, not being in that moment, letting their minds just take off on them, whenever, actually doing the opposite of the three characteristics that we're talking about. And it is, there's always talk of what, being mindless as far as being mindful, or being asleep as far as being awake, and it's all really the same opposites, since we're talking in such a dualistic way, But the Buddha, I really believe, of course I never met the man, but I really believe that he was mindful in every moment of his life, and that was his teaching. That's what his thing was, that he used concentration in his meditation practice and penetrated through all these many hindrances that were holding him back from his enlightenment, his own personal enlightenment. And he said that we all have that within us. We all have that ability. And he also said that we will all become enlightened at whenever that ripens, whenever it's the right time for us. And which means that we can be mindful for every moment. And I think we notice that, if we have a consistent practice in meditation, that we realize that after we're done meditating, we are mindful. We are more aware of everything that's going on, everything from our senses to, our senses of touch and, and feeling, to our senses of hearing and noticing what's, in our peripheral and in the room and with things that we're experiencing directly. Not only in the room, but in our entire world, that we are aware, that keen awareness, that bare awareness. And if the more we meditate, the more we can expand those. And if we think in terms of expanding those moments of mindfulness, and use that mindfulness to remind ourselves to expand it, it's like a feedback filter. It's just like remembering and expanding and remembering and being mindful. Every time that something comes up that doesn't feel right for us, ask ourselves, why is that? And I can almost guarantee it's because we're not being mindful. We're letting the agitations of the world get to us for some reason. And so that's a part of being mindful, and part of waking up is not letting these small things, not letting the worldly affairs get to us as much as as they did when we're not mindful. And that's kind of our barometer in a way that we can actually see these things. Do we feel complete? Are we fine in the moment? we are usually pretty mindful. If we have strong desires or preferences, we want things to be different, we usually aren't very mindful. We can just check on that all the time. And like I said before, we can be mindful at work. We can be mindful when we're thinking about the past. We can be mindful thinking about how we screwed up something, and we can be mindful as well while we're actually revisiting that, as long as we remember that we're mindful. And it's actually mindfulness that does that. And we can create, we can be inspired, we can think about our future and what we want to do, after the meditation meeting, or, next week or next year, or for our retirement or whatever, and be mindful as we do that as well. It's not like mindfulness is being in this dead zone, this nowness, this presence where the mind is just turned off. It's not that at all. Actually, mindfulness is a heightened state. And Krishnamurti said that it was the most heightened state of man. It was the highest level that we can be at, is to be mindful all the time. A very great teacher. And so we, as far as karma, whatever our belief is in karma, we owe it to ourselves to practice this mindfulness, to be as mindful as we can. And even if we have a meditation practice that leans more towards concentration, we should learn how to use that concentration, to penetrate our own mind and see what is happening in the area of mindfulness. Be aware, that bare attention, on the details. Notice when the mind is getting in the way in the area of thoughts, when it's getting in the way of our growth and who we are. Notice when we're not present. Notice when the I gets in the way, the ego. And I think I really feel, in my heart, that if we notice these things, we will be happier beings, we'll be happier people. Otherwise why do any of this, really? So, if you haven't read the book Mindfulness in Plain English, I strongly suggest that you read it. It's written very, very well. It's really the staple reading in the area of mindfulness. Written by one of my teachers, Bhante Gunaratana. I have a lot of copies of them, and no, this one's not signed. One time he was visiting here, and I asked him if he would sign some books for me, and he said yeah. So I got together all my Bhante Gunaratana books, and I realized I had like 5 copies of Mindfulness in Plain English, and all of the other books. So I had a stack like this, and I sat down with him, and I sat the books down there, and I gave him a pen, and he looked at me like, oh. He didn't say anything. He just signed them while we talked, and so I got all these signed copies from him. But it's a very good read. All of his books are very good. The book on concentration is excellent, Beyond Mindfulness in Plain English, where he talks about taking your practice, mindfulness practice, in the area of concentration, and also a book that we use in a lot of courses, The Eightfold Path. I might have mentioned that in here a few weeks back, but 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness. I think it's in plain English, actually. But Eight Mindful Steps to Happiness is an excellent book as well. And his new book is about metta. A book like this on loving kindness that is really, really impactful book. That kind of practice can change a person's life very, very easily. Loving kindness in plain English, yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. See you next week, if not before. Thank you.